Good morning. It's Monday, the 22nd of June. You're watching Euronews, and this is Europe Today. Welcome to the program. I'm Stefan Grobe. Coming up, between progress and setback, talks in Switzerland between Iran and the United States aimed at building out the fragile interim deal to end the war were positive and constructive, according to mediators Qatar and Pakistan. But there were some tense moments when US President Trump angered Tehran's chief negotiators when he threatened Iran, resulting in a temporary pause in the talks. We'll have the latest from our correspondent in the Middle East. Drama at Downing Street. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to step down today after pressure from inside his Labour Party became overwhelming to make way for rival Andy Burnham. Starmer, who first didn't want to go without a fight, is now aware of the new political realities, as a government spokesman said. Our analyst Merritt Gwynne-Jones will fill us in. Knocking on Europe's door. European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are meeting Moldovan President Maia Sandu in Brussels today for the second EU-Moldova summit. The meeting follows the opening of Moldova's first real accession negotiations. Now it's crunch time. We'll have Moldova's foreign minister live here in our studio. And the back and forth that nobody needs. After Poland's president stripped his Ukrainian counterpart of the country's highest state honor, current and former Ukrainian officials are renouncing their own awards. The latest episode of a spat that is hard to understand for outsiders. Tensions have been rising between Kiev and Warsaw since Zelensky named a military unit after a World War II Ukrainian insurgent army, very controversial in Poland. But first, the situation in the Middle East, where things were a little bumpy last night. The Iranians temporarily walked out of the talks in Switzerland, leaving US Vice President J.D. Vance a bit nonplussed. The reason for this stunning turn were threats by President Donald Trump to strike Iran even harder if Tehran doesn't agree to a deal. To make sense of it all, let's head over to Doha, where our correspondent Laila Humaira has the latest for us. Good morning, Laila. So, what can you tell us about the talks near Lucerne? Are they still happening? What's going on?
That's right, Stefan. Good morning. As you said there, these intense 8-hour marathon negotiations have concluded in Switzerland, with representatives from pretty much all sides hailing it as a constructive step forward and with good progress made. Now, in a joint statement, the mediators, Qatar and Pakistan, announced a roadmap which builds on the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the US and Iran last week to reach a final deal to end the war within 60 days. Now, one of the key points in this roadmap is the setting up of a high-level committee and deconfliction mechanisms to cease all hostilities in Lebanon, which we know has been a sticking point in these negotiations. So despite those tense moments in Lake Lucerne in Switzerland, we do have a positive outcome.
And Laila, what about the situation in the Strait of Hormuz this morning? The Iranians closed it again over the weekend. Give us an update.
Yes, that's right. Despite the breakthrough politically we saw in Switzerland, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz remains extremely fragile. As you said, on Saturday, Iran said it shut down the Strait of Hormuz in response to Israeli aggression in Lebanon, which is supposed to see a ceasefire in place right now. And since Saturday, we've seen vessels try and attempt going into the Strait of Hormuz only to end up turning back. Now, on paper, the US and Iran have vowed to restore freedom of navigation back in the Strait of Hormuz. But in reality, hundreds of vessels are still stranded and idle in those waters in between that critical shipping waterway.
All right, Laila Humaira in Doha for us. Thank you very much. Now, let's go to the United Kingdom, where the British press had a busy weekend, basically announcing the end of Keir Starmer's premiership as early as today. We know he was in trouble, especially after a by-election in Northern England was won by his internal rival Andy Burnham. For more on this, let's bring in our in-house UK policy expert, Merritt Gwynne-Jones, who has been following this drama closely. Good morning, Merritt.
Good morning, Stefan.
So, Merritt, this comes 2 years after a landslide victory by Starmer and his Labour Party in the general election, what has changed?
Well, indeed, Stefan, what's changed is that pressure has now been mounting on the Prime Minister Keir Starmer for weeks. His approval ratings are really quite abysmal. That's due to a series of unpopular U-turns on policy. Also controversy around the fact that he appointed Peter Mandelson, of course, to the role of the UK ambassador to the US. Such is the pressure now that members of his own Labour Party believe the party would be better off without him and that the country also would be better off with another leader. So what we're expecting today, Stefan, is for possibly Starmer to set out a timetable for his departure. That could mean departing by the July parliamentary recess or as late as the autumn, and to make way for another leader to step in and to become Prime Minister. What's unclear is whether there will be a formal contest between two or more candidates, or whether Andy Burnham will be fast-tracked to the premiership. He's, of course, the former Manchester mayor. He won a crucial by-election last week, as you mentioned, in a very pro-Brexit, I would say, constituency where Reform UK, the party of Nigel Farage, has been performing very well in recent local elections. He won that, and many members of the Labour Party believe now that Andy Burnham, informally known as the King of the North, he's an outsider as the Westminster elite, and many believe he's the only man who can really stem the meteoric rise of Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party, and the only hope now for the Labour Party. So if this does happen, as we expect, Stefan, this would mean the 7th UK Prime Minister in 10 years, which is really a sign of the instability that they're facing.
Well, interesting stuff. What does it mean internationally? Should Brussels be paying attention?
Well, as you know, Starmer has been playing a key role when it comes to bolstering Europe's defences, along with his allies, one of only 2 nuclear powers in Europe, of course, a key role in the format of the E3, along with France and Germany, and also in the process of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and the peace process in Ukraine. He's been playing a really critical role. The fear now, probably for Europe, is that we have a lame duck Prime Minister in the UK for a few months that could maybe further undermine Europe's authority. And crucially, Stefan, and finally, this comes on the eve of the 10th anniversary of the Brexit referendum tomorrow. Yeah. And we know that Starmer had made it his priority to restore ties with the European Union. We are expecting him here in Brussels at the end of July to tie up a string of deals with the EU on closer collaboration. The question now is, will he be in power for that? Will he have the authority to do that? And will his successor have the same vision as him when it comes to ties with the European Union?
Well, looking forward to that. I see what Prime Minister will come to Brussels in July. Merritt Gwynne-Jones there. Thanks for bringing us up to date. Of course, all this drama in London unfolds as the United Kingdom wants to put its post-Brexit relationship with the EU on a new footing, short of membership, of course. Now, one country that wants membership is Moldova. In fact, Moldova applied to join the EU in March 2022, received candidate status in June that year, and formally opened accession negotiations in June 2024. The latest phase, launched in Luxembourg on the 15th of June of this year, concerns the so-called fundamentals cluster. That's the part of accession talks that often determines the pace and credibility of the entire process. Let's talk about today's EU-Moldova summit now with Moldova's Foreign Minister Mihai Popsoi, who joins me here on the set. Good morning, Minister. Great to have you with us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back.
So that cluster that I mentioned earlier matters because it's not confined to technical lawmaking, if I may say. It examines whether democratic institutions are stable, whether corruption is being tackled, whether the courts are independent, whether public money is traceable, and whether fundamental rights are protected in practice. How do you feel about these talks?
Well, these talks are very important to us, and the fact that Moldova has been able to reach this important milestone a few days ago, opening the clusters and now having our second Moldova-European Union summit, is a testament to the effort and to the progress that Moldovan institutions and Moldovan society is reaching under very difficult circumstances. When it comes to the fundamentals, we would not have it any other way. It is very much in our interest, in the interest of Moldovan citizens, to make sure that we consolidate Moldovan institutions, that we make democratic consolidation irreversible, that we deliver to the promise we made to our citizens to combat effectively corruption, to consolidate democratic freedoms. This this is at the end part and parcel of our political agenda. If it also helps us to join the European Union, it's great. But our commitment is to our citizens back home, and we are thankful that this commitment is paying off, including in the opening of the first cluster on fundamentals.
I want to ask you about Russia, that continues to exert pressure on Moldova through disinformation, energy leverage, and, of course, the unresolved issue of Transnistria. Is the EU doing enough to help you guys with this, or are you still largely on your own?
The European Union and EU member states have been incredibly supportive of the Republic of Moldova throughout the past years, when circumstances have been very difficult, including in the energy sphere. But of course, we are in the driver's seat and we need to deliver on our own efforts back home. And we are working tirelessly, proactively, to engage with the folks from the left bank in the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova to make sure that all Moldovan citizens, no matter where they live, on which part of the river, benefit from Moldova's EU accession. So it's an important process in making sure that Moldova advances on its European path. And the two tracks, the European integration and the reintegration of the Transnistrian region, are two parallel tracks. Because otherwise we would give the Kremlin leverage and de facto veto over our accession process. But we're working hard to make sure that all Moldovan citizens benefit like they had already benefited from the deep and comprehensive free trade area, which the Transnistrian region of Moldova has benefited a lot as well.
All right, Mihai Popsoy, the Foreign Minister of Moldova there. Thank you, sir, for helping us understand your perspective. We stay in Eastern Europe and go to Ukraine and Poland. An old conflict that goes back to World War II is at the origin of a diplomatic row between Warsaw and Kiev that gets nastier almost by the day. The latest is that Polish President Nawrocki stripped President Zelensky of Ukraine of Warsaw's highest state honor. What's it all about? Jakub Janas has the details.
Politics is about symbols, and this time was no different. A recent military designation has sparked a major diplomatic crisis between Warsaw and Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky named an elite special operations unit after UPA heroes to honor their modern battlefield performance. And in response, Polish President Karol Nawrocki announced intentions to strip Zelensky of Poland's highest state award, the Order of the White Eagle. This dispute exposes deeply conflicting national narratives. What exactly is going on here? For Poland, the UPA, so Ukrainian Insurgent Army, is responsible for a campaign of genocidal ethnic cleansing in the 1940s that resulted in the deaths of an estimated 100,000 Polish civilians in Volyn in Ukrainian or Wołyń in Polish, so a historic region with deep Polish and Ukrainian roots. This violence also systematically targeted Jewish survivors who had escaped the Holocaust. Conversely, for Ukraine, the UPA is remembered as a symbol of anti-Soviet resistance and a heroic struggle for independence. And as Ukraine defends itself against the full-scale Russian invasion, this legacy of resistance is viewed as a vital tool for public resilience. And Ukrainian officials emphasize that this designation was a grassroots request from the frontline soldiers with no anti-Polish intentions. However, Polish leaders maintain that the memory of the victims is entirely non-negotiable. The risks of this trust crisis are exceptionally high, with some in Warsaw even calling for blocking Ukraine's EU accession over the scandal. And public solidarity is also facing pressure, as this unresolved dispute risks breaking the bond between both nations. And addressing the tension, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk noted that both nations must prevent historical emotions from destroying their solidarity. A prolonged conflict, Tusk warned, ultimately only serves the strategic interests of Moscow. So as said, politics is about symbols, but this time it could be different. Because history shows that even the deepest historical wounds can be managed through active cooperation. A precedent clearly seen in the journey of Polish-German reconciliation. The Ukrainian Insurgent Army will always remain a deeply divisive symbol. Yet, the shared security of both nations today depends on managing this historical pain together, rather than allowing the past to shatter their alliance.
Well, these intentions voiced by the Polish president are finally becoming reality. To get to the bottom of this, I'm glad to have our expert Sasha Vakulina in the studio now. Good morning, Sasha.
Morning.
So the Polish president stripped Zelensky of his honorary title. What was the reaction in Ukraine?
The reaction was immediate, with Volodymyr Zelensky sending it back to Warsaw. You could see here the photos with the medal, the Order of the White Eagle, being sent by Zelensky back to Warsaw to Kolonarodsky. There is this invoice with his name there, you can see. And Zelensky explained his decision on X, saying if it is considered that this special symbol may remain with Catherine II, Benito Mussolini and Gerhard Schroeder, then we in Ukraine will not argue with that. Following Zelensky's decision, also the head of his office, the foreign minister of Ukraine, the ambassador of Ukraine to Poland, and 3 ex-presidents of Ukraine all renounced their orders.
That was quite a mix of recipients there. This is quite an unprecedented escalation between Warsaw and Kiev. What's happening next?
Well, that's a huge question also, because later this week, there's a Ukraine Reconstruction Conference taking place in Gdańsk in Poland, which should be co-hosted by Ukraine and Poland. According to Euronews sources, Volodymyr Zelensky was confirmed as of last week to participate. Now it's an open question whether he will show up in Gdańsk.
All right, Sasha Vakulina here in the studio. Thank you very much for these insights. And now let's talk football. And there were some eye-popping results last night. First of all, Mohamed Salah led Egypt to their first ever World Cup victory as they recovered to beat New Zealand 3-1, moving to the top of Group G and boosting their hopes of reaching the knockout stage. In that same Group G, Iran battled to a well-deserved point against 10-man Belgium with a 0-0 draw. Iran's hopes of making the knockout stages are now very much alive, whereas the Red Devils provided their fans with another evening of disappointment. And I think I'm going to hear a lot about that in Brussels today. Then Cape Verde continued the adventure as the team produced another shocker by forcing a 2-2 draw on Uruguay. A result that gets them second in their group for now. Remember, they drew with Spain in their tournament debut, which was their first stunner. Speaking of Spain, the team showed signs of regained consciousness by delivering a 4-0 thrashing of Saudi Arabia, with superstar Lamine Yamal becoming only the second player aged 18 and under to open scoring in a World Cup match. On the menu today is Argentina against Australia, France versus Iraq, Norway, Senegal, and Jordan against Algeria. That's it for today. Thanks for joining us this Monday morning. Do get in touch with any of your questions or comments via our email address. That's europetoday@euronews.com. In the meantime, stay with us for more of the latest news live here on Euronews. I'm Stefan Grobe. Take care and see you tomorrow.